this case, it was much calmer. You're in a situation where people have built like complex ways in which to view things and have built complex argumentation. And you can just come in and say, but wait guys, these are the elements, just draw a straight line through. And you come and you simplify the debate. And you choose the line of debate that leads you to the conclusion with the least amount of pain. This happens a lot when you're on upside. Government has brought this complex policy trying to close as many holes as possible. There are people who build complex models around if this happens we do this, this happens we do this, this happens we do this. And then closing op just comes in and says, wait a minute, you gave me a list of harms. You told me you can solve them by doing this. Just do this. And it's like, oh, why did they go through all that effort to defend all the stuff they were supposed to defend? Where meanwhile, they should have maybe spent their time trying to look for a more simple solution. And sometimes the simple solutions are incredibly elegant. And just by showing that one of those simple solutions exist, almost rubbishes any need for the policy to begin. What time is it?
I remember like
nearly 11.
We had a debate. We had a debate about this house would in prostitution or something. This house would rather criminalize the demand and not the supply. And Michelle, closing off, just stood up and said, but why don't you just illegalize it?
See, that's the Occam's razor. You brought a simple solution. Now, when we apply Occam's razor to those arguments, the most complex solutions are not as feasible as the simple one anymore. Very good thing to spot when you're opening up. Chances are you won't quite get to it soon enough. You need to engage with the debate as it is, but sometimes at closing off can really turn heads. And really make you think about and especially if the motion is bad to begin with, because I believe that it's one of those things where if the motion is bad, then things like that can exist, loopholes and that can exist. But those are the debates you want to be winning. The ones winning the chance of you winning just by being saying, hey. So, let's start the video. We're going to watch the one speech. So, lottery of birth. I always like to, the first way it was explained to me, and the first way I like to explain it is in the most obvious way it is stated. Lottery of birth. Imagine I had an infinite amount of lotto machines. And before I am born, or at the time before I'm conceived, I have to walk past each of these lotto balls, press a button, and get a characteristic. Beauty, skin color, geography, cancer gene, whatever the case may be. And there's a huge bunch of them, of every single characteristic that makes baby human, right? From the basic ones like hair color to the more serious ones like rich or poor, ugly, beautiful, dumb, clever. Sorry, yeah, you know what I mean. Not that you can see. Dumb, clever, you understand? Opportunities that you're born in, the time in which you're born in. If all of us had to then sit with our box of, our little box of balls we've just picked up in every one of these things, those are generally the characteristics that will make up you. But in a general sense, now ignoring the whole, there's a role for your life purpose about greater purpose, predetermined. Over and above that, if that weren't a factor in this, we would say that these are the bunch of things you're born into the world. You understand? There's very little you can do about it. Very much of what you've got in your basket is what you've got in your basket. Very little of it you can throw out, and a lot of it, including, by the way, who your parents are, which could be one of the goals, is something that is completely out of your control. If there would be any policy, if there was any policy that would want to split a specific group of people, or that by analysis puts a group of people in harm's way because of some sort of characteristic that was obtained in the birth lottery that you have absolutely no control over, then we would say, just in general, you would want to argue that that is, incredibly unfair or wrong. Or the perfect example I like to use recently in debates with like friends and all is around Zimbabwe. So, these EFF-esque people who have now, hit the scene and are all pro-Mugabe, and I would also be pro-Mugabe, but here's my problem with this situation. He says, people say there will be war, casualties in war, right? My only problem with that is, if in this war, some despot gets to choose who the casualties are, there's a fundamental unfairness to that. Or if and usually this is done along racial lines. This is done along, ethnic lines, etc., etc., etc. So what happened in Rwanda? As much as we like to say there's casualties in war, the fact of the matter is there were people on top, and the people who were being killed just because of the way they were born was nothing you could do about it. You've got absolutely no cognitive defense against your blackness or your being a woman or whatever, you understand. It's not really a choice you make. Of course, I've heard the argumentation that in these days you can, like, I don't know if they saw the article where they created a fake vagina that they can physically grow in you or whatever. So I guess then there's argumentation there about the spectrum of gender we have now versus the spectrum of gender we had 20, 30 years ago. You can kind of choose to be any variety of straight or gay or transsexual, pansexual, asexual. Oh my goodness, there's so many of them. He literally says gender bender. And so where there was once fixed categories, the fixed categories aren't there. So I guess we could argue that gender isn't necessarily one. But in general, you don't choose, the different parts of your body. They're all given to you by birth. The fact that you have to suffer through any sort of pain just because of the way you were born is never a good thing. So the example is that female genital mutilation motion we got at nationals, semi-finals, I think. And this type of argumentation is incredibly important. And what it makes you realize that the lines you are drawing between some of these things is quite arbitrary. So what I was trying to show with the Zimbabwe one is that it's okay to say all victims, or every war is a casualty if you have 100% chance of being safe because you are locked and your genitals are locked in some basement room while people are dying for you. You understand? But it's even more ridiculous when you systematically create a system that systematically disadvantages the people who do not agree with you. You understand? If there was a normal distribution and people had a random chance of dying in a pre-social contract world where we were all cavemen again, and the chances of you dying are pretty much the same as the chances of me dying, then we're okay with that being dispersed the way it is. But war is not that. The people who make the decision to go into war probably almost never die. You understand? And if they do, then the good guys go into war and fight themselves. And the only reason they do that is because that's the only way they can give their soldiers to fight for them. So again, they're safer than everyone else at the fringes. So all of these things, this is the type of argumentation that lottery of birth brings in. It makes you challenge the drawn lines, the lines of assumption. You're seeing this beautiful thing as if it works, but for who does it work? And why does it work for you?
Cyprian, would it be a smart or a dumb thing to run a birth lottery argument in a affirmative action motion? You didn't choose to be white in the post-apartheid system because from the government or whatever opposition side it would be, well, these people didn't choose to be black in a system where they were previously disadvantaged.
You will need to nuance, because the argument that goes against that one is actually quite a simple one. So here's a scenario I've got for you. Let's say your friend stole money from you, right? So he stole money from you, kept it with him. He gets a kid, he dies. Question is, do you still deserve that money? Does that money belong to that child? I mean, he didn't take it from me. And I would go as far as to argue that even if you weren't supposed, even if you don't get the money, that person shouldn't have it either. Because it's not theirs. Whether it's yours or not, whether we can give it back to you or not, is less relevant than it's not theirs. And I've heard an argument of like, that's the type of places where government should come in and say, the way in which you got this is fundamentally incorrect, regardless of whether you've taken ownership of it or whatever. We don't even necessarily need to believe that this needs to be reappropriated, because sometimes direct reappropriation cannot occur. Because just in the same way as your child didn't work for it, your child's not going to get it either. And this is where government comes in, and government says we will absorb those types of assets and then spread them out to the country. That's the other reappropriation argument. I think birth lottery kind of fails to that if the policy that's been put into place is being put in to do exactly what I just said. You understand? Then all of a sudden it becomes a bit random. Because in your case, you could argue birth lottery both ways. Yeah, but that's kind of irrelevant because once these two people are dead, that asset still belongs to either their family or their family, but none of them deserve it. You understand? So that's definitely the name claims person, land restitution and servitude and those kind of clauses in the law are kind of around this type of principle, and they will outweigh a birth lottery argument in many situations, unless you're able to provide a basic context. I'm almost done. Yeah, 2 slides left.
You started to shout through on speech.
Okay. So we had this discussion. So the motion here was, if intelligence could be measured perfectly, this House would make your vote proportional to your intelligence. It was a provincial final in 2012, us and UFS, and Ruben and I were opening up. I had spoken, and Rudolph and Bernard were opening Gav. Kumin and Johan were closing Gav, and Zola, I and Zola were closing. Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick favor? I've got like 8 minutes of footage.